Hello, Twitch. I've got my Vans hat. I've got my homemade boots, or kombucha for those not in the know on boots. It must be another episode. Howdy, partner. I'm A.M. Grabelny. I'm one of the hosts here, an AWS solutions architect. I'm joined over here by my very close best friend, maybe? I don't know. I don't know if we're at that point in a relationship yet, Young, where I can call you best friend, and you'll allow me to. But Young is joining me. You may have seen Young on the last episode too. Young is becoming a fixture here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Young.
Hello, everyone. This is my second time. Excited to be here. Hopefully just settling in. I'm also a partner solutions architect here at AWS. AM and I are best friends, sort of, I guess. We're working towards it. Not there yet. We're missing that 2%. Not sure what it is. Hopefully we do more of these shows together and we'll make it there. But I am excited to be here as well.
Friend. We got a brand new friend here too, Young, right? We should introduce Rich, shouldn't we?
Yeah. Should I, or Rich can do the honors here?
Go for it.
Rich here is with us from LaunchDarkly. He's gonna join us, talk a little bit about LaunchDarkly, some of the cool things that they do, show us a cool demo, get you guys involved. Hopefully you have a lot of questions for him. Rich, you wanna add anything to that?
No, I thought that was a great introduction. My name is, again, Rich Manalang. I'm a developer advocate here at LaunchDarkly, and I'm so pleased to be joining you guys on your Howdy Partner channel.
Howdy Partner. What is Howdy Partner, Young? If you've never seen this show before, you're joining us for the first time. Who should watch? What are we doing? What do we do on this show?
Well, great that you asked, because Howdy Partner is a show where we like to host our partners, want to highlight some of the cool things they do, give them a platform to show some of the cool things that have done or are doing. Usually involves a demo, which we will see today. Get some of the more developer-friendly, developer-minded audience involved. Hopefully everybody has a great time. So please don't hesitate to ask a lot of questions along the way. We'll be monitoring the chat. Hope to answer all the questions and just have fun. I think that's the most important part here.
The having fun part is mandatory. I just want you both to know that. It is not suggested, it's mandatory. You must have fun. Just kidding. Anyway.
I'll try my hardest.
Thank you, Rich. Yeah, I already appreciate the attitude. It's great. I didn't hear Young say that he was going to try to have fun. So
I think it was implied.
Strike against you. Sorry, that's the first strike. Yeah. So if you're unaware, AWS, we have a partners network, right? And our partners network is composed of two types of partners primarily. We've got our technology partners, which Rich and LaunchDarkly fall into. This means that they built a piece of technology that maybe operates as a SaaS or something that you deploy into your AWS account that helps you work with things that are AWS adjacent, I'll call it. And we also have consulting partners, and we've had a few of those on the show before. We had Ryan from Trek 10 just a few weeks ago, for example. And these are people that help you scope out projects as a company and build these things. So what I love about being in the partner network personally is that we get to talk to a lot of people that work at companies that have things that AWS just doesn't do, or maybe these companies do these things better. In the case of Rich here, this is definitely something that AWS does not have whatsoever. So this is a really great way to complement some of the things that you will be building on AWS, and a great way to manage application development. I think is what we're gonna talk about that first, right? Because I think with feature flags, which we'll learn what that means if you've never heard that term, I think a lot of people who have, they think about it as a UI feature flip, right? But that's not necessarily all there is to it. Rich shared with me some interesting use cases ahead of time, just to be fully transparent, right? Nothing up my sleeves. He did tell me some of these use cases up front, so they aren't going to be surprises to me, but they will be to you. But let's set the stage, Young. I think a lot of people when they think about AWS, right, they think infrastructure, they think networking, they think a lot of the things that backend engineers are really worried about. But these people who are building client applications or mobile apps or web pages or anything like that, right? I think they get lost sometimes when they're talking about AWS. What do you think about that, Young? Do you think that's true?
Well, as it turns out, we have this great service that you can use if you are a web developer or application developer.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We have something for this. Really?
Yeah, it is called AWS Amplify. Turns out it is one of your favorite service that we have here at AWS. Is that right, AM?
No. I mean, maybe Nikki Stone from the AWS Amplify team maybe paid me to say that it was my favorite service, but yes, it is also one of my favorites. So hard to pick a favorite though. What is it, Young? So, what is Amplify? What does that mean?
So as an application developer or a web developer, you may or may not have experience using the cloud as a backend for your any kind of front end work. So Amplify is a service, more like a framework set of tools that sort of help you make that integration with your front end to the services that we offer in the back end. So let me show you what I mean, and I have a little, I guess, cool little demo.
Ooh, a demo.
Kind of show what Amplify is all about. If you can bring the screen, that'd be great.
Got it. You're up.
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of split screen. I have my terminal up for the demo I want to show you, but just to cover the basics of Amplify, if you go to the documentation, it talks about Amplify being this tool that can use to enable your front end or even mobile app to build a full stack, and the back end being the resources from AWS. Let me just show you, if you click on getting started, you can see that you can pretty much get started with a simple tutorial to develop your app using Amplify. And it provides these different framework, which one is your choice, is up to you. I'm going to show my demo on React, but I don't want to start a war on, which is the best framework. So
I do. What's your favorite framework? Which one's best?
I don't want to go into that, but if you have any, if the audience has any opinion about that, please let us know in the chat. So it supports your basic, some of the more well-known web framework, React, Angular, Vue, obviously JavaScript, some of the mobile ones, Android, iOS, React Native, and so on and so forth. And let's just kind of get started with the intro on the doc. So some of the things that are offered through Amplify first is the CLI. So you could do all these, providing adding up services, hooking it up to your front end, and even publishing through a simple command line CLI. And I'm going to kind of show you how that works. If you look on the right side of the screen, hopefully everybody can see. I think it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Let us know.
I don't know.
Let us. Oh,
Oops.
now it went away.
Sorry, technical difficulties here, but should be zoomed in. So right now you're looking at a blank screen. It's in a React directory of a demo app that I have. And the first thing you do to get started is to initiate Amplify to make sure that you're able to hook up your front end to the Amplify CLI. So the first thing, before I say that, obviously you have to install your CLI. It's using npm. See if I can pull the direction. On the dock, there's a simple command that you run on your terminal to install it using npm. So I've already done that. And on the screen, let me show you some of the commands that you can run on the CLI. So it gives you some of the commands that are available. Obviously, to initialize your Amplify project, you have to run amplify init, which is what we're going to do right now.
As you do that, I just want to point out too, Young, that I like to, what I call Amplify is it's kind of an opinionated framework is what I like to refer to it as. It makes some choices for you. It lets you configure some things. Some things, you know, if you stay on the rails are a little easier. You can eject from those rails for some things. As you're going through this right here, you've got some choices that it's giving you right now, right, to configure it. So,
right. Some of the things are like name for the project. I'm just going to keep it the same. Environment, let's do a dev environment. Your default editor of your choice, again, it's up to you. I'm not going to say which one's the best or which one's the favorite. We can have that war in the chat, just like we did with the framework. So for the sake of this demo, I'm going to use VS Code. And it asks you other questions like, you know, what type of app, what framework are you using? For this is React. And, you know, your source directory path, build, some of the commands, build start commands. And this is the interesting part. Obviously, as you can probably tell, it's AWS Amplify, so you would probably need your AWS account information. Here, we are asked if you want to use an AWS profile. This is a profile that you set up when you use AWS CLI. So the same profile that, if you have it already set up, should work also with this Amplify environment. Since I already have one called default, I will just choose that. And it will start initializing your Amplify project. And what it does is it's creating some of the resources and the buckets that are needed to start the project. And it does it in the form of a CloudFormation template that gets deployed.
it's the cool thing about Amplify is that, like, it's not a separate service. It's just utilizing services in the background that are already AWS services, but it's doing it for you. So that you don't actually need to know necessarily how to set all this up yourself, right? Like but if you ever need to piece anything out from it, it's just straight up CloudFormation, right? It's the same tools that everybody's used to using, not something separate.
So yeah, so if you know CloudFormation and how that works, this is exactly what it's doing in the background. So now we have created an Amplify project. I already have another demo app that's been set up with Amplify. So I'm actually gonna go to that one. That was just to show, you know, how this gets initiated. Let me see. So we are here in the Howdy partner demo, which is already set up with Amplify. Let me show you what the front end actually looks like. You can serve a local, you can spin up a local server with the command amplify serve, which is pretty much equivalent to npm start. Right now, it doesn't have any resources, but we should be able to run the front end app, and supposedly I'm running it already. But let me just run it in another server, 3001, and it is spinning up the resource or the website. So what you're looking at here is a simple sign-in authentication front end. Obviously, there's no backend hooked up to it, and that's sort of the steps I'm gonna show you how to do it. So that was just for your reference.
Did you make this sign-in page yet?
I actually
handcraft the CSS yourself?
I did not, and let me go back to the doc where we talked about some of the stuff that Amplify offers. And one of the things that it offers is the UI component. And basically, it's a UI library for whatever framework that you choose to use. And you can simply, install it using Yarn. Let me actually show you the code, because there is an authenticator part. So if we go to
I don't know about you, Rich, but like I've built a lot of sign-in pages in my time, and I don't ever want to build another one personally. Like,
I completely agree.
So this is kind of a nice way to prototype, right? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as you can see, there are some libraries imported from the UI components. There was another one for UI React. And these Amplify Authenticator and the signouts are what's allowing all the events to happen. So basically, all you have to do is, what happens when that occurs. You kind of, you put in your little HTML code. I mean, nothing different, but the library takes care of all the workflows and things like that, as you will see when we add the authentication resource to our Amplify. So that was another cool component of Amplify. And again, if you have any questions, please put it on the chat. We have AM, the Amplify guru, the expert, to help you answer all the questions. So.
Oh, sorry. Bye.
Let's see. So I will exit out of the local server for now. So the next step we want to do is to actually have a backend for the authentication page. And we're going to use the Amplify to first add that resource, have it pushed to our cloud, and then to end everything, we're going to publish it and then be able to access it on the cloud. So with that said, I'm going to run the add command. We are adding the authorization resource to our Amplify project. It will ask you for some questions, just like you did when you did Amplify init. There's some choices here. You can do default configuration with social provider, manual configuration. If you click, I want to learn more, it just kind of gives you an option of what each choice is and what it provides. I'm going to just choose the default configuration, keep it simple. I want users to sign in using username. And I don't want to configure any advanced settings. So it has added resource. It's nice enough to tell you some of the next steps, as you can see here on the bottom where I have it highlighted. So once we added our resource, we want to push it to be able to provision that resource on the cloud. So that's the next step we'll take. Amplify push.
Yeah, so nothing has actually been created yet at this point. It's just locally tracking it in your project, and no changes to your CloudFormation have happened yet. but that's what push
Correct.
does.
Yeah, and then it'll actually confirm with you if you want to push that resource that we just created. Let's say yes. It'll then update those resources to the cloud. It is taking some time, but again, it is using CloudFormation template to sort of create the resources that it needs to push into the cloud. So, same idea as before. It is nothing fancier than just using CloudFormation to get everything set up.
What I think is cool about this is that, like, as an app dev, right? Like, I understand what I need to add as a feature, right? I understand that I need sign-in or I need authentication. What I may not understand is, if I've never used AWS, what is that, what does that translate to in these cloud services that we have, right? Now, I know that because I work at AWS and I've done this for many years, that it translates to Cognito, but you may even run into a point where you're like, how do I set up Cognito? Do I create an IDP? Do I create a user pool? Do I need both? How do I set these things up? Amplify really gives you, like, this is where the opinions of Amplify come into really good practice, where it's going to set it up for you so that you don't necessarily need to know all of the ins and outs of Cognito, and you could just move on, get your auth and move forward, right? Just connect it up through a JavaScript library that you pull down and move on to, not to say more important features, but maybe features that add more value to the application that you're trying to build, right? So it's pretty cool. It really aligns with more of what an app dev is thinking through, and less of, like, I have to go investigate these services and figure out which ones align to the feature that I'm trying to build, right? Cool. I know we're still waiting on some cloud permission here, right? This is very
Just a question
exciting
for you guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you wanted to go in there and say you needed to change a policy or something, you can go in there into the AWS console and do it yourself, right?
Yeah, I would urge, on the side of caution, to not try and manipulate stuff so much that you've created through Amplify through direct CloudFormation. I would try and do as much as possible through the CLI tool itself. But I think there are ways to, quote unquote, eject from, like, the Amplify framework itself. But yeah, I would make those changes mostly through Amplify. But yeah,
Makes sense.
That's a question I think a lot of people probably have as well. Yeah. So, like, you can actually, so what Young probably won't have time to get into here is, you can actually delete resources through the Amplify CLI. You can edit resources through the Amplify CLI. These are all things that are all possible through the actual tool itself. You get into a little bit of trouble if you try and start altering things outside, because then you get into these areas where your project doesn't reflect the changes that have happened in the cloud. So, that type of thing you might want to avoid. Cool. It looks like we're done. I bought us enough time. Yeah.
Yeah, so now that we have everything ready, before we publish, we actually have to add hosting as a resource. So we will do that. And gives you a couple of options. Amplify console is a way for you to be able to handle the CI/CD part of your deployment. It is a console that comes with Amplify. Obviously, you can also do it with CloudFront and S3. I'd urge you to dig more into it yourself to see how console works, what are different ways of working it. For the purpose of the demo, I'm just going to select that just to keep everything simple.
It's very easy to hook up Amplify console to a Git repo and then have changes to that Git repo push and have a real CI/CD pipeline without having to set any of that up, and just using Amplify console for things like static sites and things like React apps and Vue apps and Angular apps.
Which is the next question, actually. But instead of continuous deployment, I'm just going to use manual deployment. So everything's now ready to go. I will type in publish to get this up on the console. Again, this takes a bit of time, but what happens is that we'll get a link and we have to make sure all the resources are on there. So again, it's doing all the changes and adding hosting using CloudFormation template. And since we chose the console option, it will upload it to a, I think, generated URL, which we can then use to access the website. Hopefully this doesn't take too long.
I think you've actually got one up, don't you?
I did earlier, but
okay.
I deleted it. So
okay. Oh well.
In the meantime, if you have any questions, let us know. And for those of you that are just joining in, we are on the Howdy Partner Twitch show with Rich from LaunchDarkly. I am doing a demo on AWS Amplify to show how you can deploy your front-end applications to AWS Cloud using our back-end resources, which will hopefully lead to Rich's cool demos today on feature flagging. Right now, I'm taking the React app that I've created, deploying it, or adding resources that I needed for an authentication page, and we are currently in the process of publishing it onto the cloud. And it's almost ready. Should be a URL that gets generated. And once that gets generated, I can show you what that looks like.
Yeah, I wanted to share too while this was going on. One of the great things for Amplify Console as well is the support for multiple environments that actually map directly to a Git branch too. So it's really easy to set up like a dev environment that just points at a dev branch. And you can just push changes out to that dev environment and have a real HTTPS endpoint, to test as your dev environment before you make these changes to a production site, for example.
So now we have our application. Just want to quickly show you that it works. I'm going to create an account since we don't have any. So what ends up happening is that once we generate our account, that actually has to be a real email address. Oops. What ends up happening is that the user pool will add this account. Again, this is not a real phone number, but if you are curious, you can call.
That's Young's real phone number. You can call Young right there. I'm just kidding.
Let's see. It sends a confirmation to my email, which I will quickly check. Just give me 1 second. So what ends up happening here is that it's registering that user to the user pool that's created on AWS. And once this gets set up,
there you go.
Wow. So
Nice.
it just logs into Howdy Partner. Obviously, there's not a lot of stuff here. But, so now we figured out that you can create an app, you're able to deploy it using AWS very easily to get the backend managed. But on top of this, you want to, build out different features, test them out, see what works and what doesn't work. So that's why we have Rich here to show us, and hopefully those will be a lot more interesting than the demo you just watched on feature flagging and LaunchDarkly.
Don't sell yourself short there, Young. I think it's really powerful what you just showed, right? That you didn't have to set up any of that sign-in feature or functionality at all, right? Like you didn't have to go figure out how to send a confirmation code on sign-up, which is often a requirement, right? That was already built for you in Amplify. And then, like you said, you want to move on to the next feature, but how do you develop features without data, right? And how do you develop features without being able to test these things with your real users and see what reacts, with them more readily than other options that you are approaching. So that's what most people think about feature flags, I think, and the role that they play with application development. So I really wanted us to show that it's very easy to actually, if you're an app dev, to be able to utilize AWS and Amplify framework to start building something. And then it's going to be equally as easy to start testing out new features with different variations by using LaunchDarkly to do that. And so, Rich, I'm hoping you can take it away and even get to the part where there's some very exciting things that you can do with feature flags that most people don't even maybe consider.
Absolutely. That was a good demo, Young. I think it's very cool. It's good times to be a developer these days. There's so many services out there that help you bootstrap much faster than you're able to, on your own. I mean, I didn't know. I've heard about Amplify, but I didn't know you guys had custom components like that you could make, easily use, like build an authentication page, for instance. And it reminds me, this may be a terrible comparison, but I don't know if you remember RAD, Rapid Application Development. Oh, this really dates me. But anyway, you could Google it. There's probably a Wikipedia page on it somewhere. Anyway, again, my name is Rich Manalang. I am from LaunchDarkly. And if you've never heard of LaunchDarkly before, we are in the business of what we call feature management. We started out about 5 years ago. And back then, not very many people had heard of feature flags. Certainly back then, I had used feature flags, but most of the time, I mean, like there weren't any services out there that they could actually use. If you used it before, it was probably homegrown. I think it was Flickr that was the one that kind of coined the term and introduced it. And actually, I don't know if Flickr predates Martin Fowler's feature toggles page on feature toggles. But certainly the idea is not entirely new. The idea is that, the traditional way of deploying software is like, if you're part of an agile team or a team that likes to deploy software rapidly, like multiple times a day, you want to get features out as quickly as you can build them. That for teams like that, that was a very popular way of developing software. Still is a very popular way of developing software, right? But with those sort of practices come risks at times, right? Like you could deploy something that wasn't well tested, like maybe a developer or two tested it, or maybe you tested it against your environment, but never against what happens in your real user environment. And it may work, it may not. It's kind of a gamble, right? So feature flags are kind of born from that whole idea of separating the release of your feature from the deploy of it, right? So it makes deploying software safe. So you could go out and deploy as much as you want, and then be able to turn on a feature when you need to. And the thing with feature flags, the way it manifests itself is it's in your code. There's basically like if statements in your code that says, is this feature turned on? If this feature is turned on, then show this feature. If not, show the default feature, right? If you've done any sort of like A/B testing in the past, it's very similar. It's just basically defining conditionals in your code. And those conditionals come from a service, like in our case, LaunchDarkly, where those feature flags live and the rules behind them live. So let me share my screen real quick.
All right. There we go.
All right. You guys see my screen?
You're up.
All right. So just a few slides. I promise we won't get to a slide presentation here too much. But basically, just some use cases of why you would want to use feature flags. Like I said earlier, it's the whole idea of separating your deploy from release. So say you're creating a new feature and you want to go out and release it to the world. Well, you wouldn't normally, in today's world, you don't typically write a feature and deploy it to all of your users, especially if you're a large company, right? Like, I mean, if you're like a Netflix or something, you probably wouldn't do that because there's a lot of risk in that. So one of the ways you could release a feature is you could release it to yourself. You could test it in production on your own, or your team, or your company. You could target a small population of users, like say, early adopters or beta users, and you can be very precise in like how you target as well. So like the typical, you've heard of canaries before, like if you're part of any sort of like the Chrome canaries, right, where you take a like really early version of Google Chrome and install it, and it may break, it may not, you're not quite sure, but you're getting the latest and greatest features. And it can trickle down to beta users, and then eventually when it's safe enough, everything looks good, you can release it to all your users. But beyond just releasing features, there are more benefits to using feature flags. One of the things that what makes it safe to use feature flags is that if something does go wrong, right, you could toggle, you could turn it back off. You could kill it. But one of the neat things that we've been starting to see our customers using is kind of like reactive monitoring. So like say you have like an observability tool like a Datadog or Honeycomb or New Relic or something like that. And you can track performance of your apps, or even tools like Rollbar, for instance, that allow you to track exceptions that are happening in your code. Well, what if you release a feature through a feature flag, and all of a sudden you see a spike in exceptions that are happening in your code through Rollbar or Sentry or some tool like that? Well, now you could actually automate that and have it react to your LaunchDarkly service and turn that feature flag back off. So instead of a human doing it, you could build resiliency in your system to do that for you. There's other types of ways people use it for operations. Like another example is rate limiting, for instance. If you got an API and you've got a predefined set of rate limits, and different resources might have different rate limits because some operations may be more expensive than others. So one of the things you could do is you could define a set of feature flags that have a bunch of different variations as to like what the rate limit is for a particular resource, right? So like if you're monitoring the performance of your system and you're seeing degradation of some sort, well, you may not have the opportunity to scale really quickly. So what you might do is you might want to alter your rate limits, maybe drop your rate limits down. Also, things like for real-time apps, I've seen customers use feature flags this way to alter their jitter frequency. So like when clients reconnect to their service, or like a common one is when you're logging into a service or you're authenticating, there's typically some sort of jitter involved in those resources. But there's lots of different types of ways you can use it for operational benefits. So we'll get into that a little bit more later down the demo.
Can I throw you a curveball real quick, Rich, and ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, you can totally ignore me if this is way too off topic. But do you ever see anybody utilizing feature flags for any types of like chaos engineering type activities?
Yeah. So it's interesting because for sure you could use feature flags in that capacity. I don't know any customers particularly using it in those capacities, but you could. You could devise a whole set of feature flags that kind of cascade, because you can have dependencies in feature flags, for example. One of the things you could potentially do is like if you're getting slammed, right? Like your system's getting DDoSed, you could have a feature flag that starts turning off different features, like maybe like non-essential features of your app, just to keep your application working, right? Prevent it from going down. Like, maybe you turn a few features off, or maybe you lower the targeting on it, right? You go, instead of like deploying it to or having 100% of your users be able to use that feature, maybe you throttle it down to a smaller percentage. For sure, you could devise all kinds of crazy ways to do things. And that's one of the neat things about LaunchDarkly is that it's kind of a Swiss Army knife, and how you use it kind of depends entirely on you. And we're learning about new use cases that our customers are using or building out, as we go. It's kind of interesting. Good question. Experimentation. That's another thing that our customers use us for. You've heard of ABN testing. The traditional way of displaying two or more features out to people and determining the success rate of each feature. I'll show you that a little bit later as to how that works and how we implement that. And I promise this is the last slide, but I think this is the most unique part about LaunchDarkly. In the past, I don't know how many of you here use feature flags in your services and your software, but there was this popular trend to create your own feature flagging system, because in the end, you think about it, it's not really that hard. It's like Booleans, right? You need a database to store the flags, and you need a Boolean to basically determine if something's on and off, right? And then you could, you want to get more sophisticated, you might want to build in percentage-based targeting, so that you could say, I want 20% of my users to see this. But then if you build that, then you're going to have to build a way to track users, uniquely. And then you can kind of go on and kind of, expand and expand and expand. Well, we've done that for the past 5 years. And some of the things that we've built into LaunchDarkly is a result of all the different use cases that we've seen for ourselves and for our customers. So our architecture, it's very scalable. The idea is that we ship out, so we have, 24 different SDKs. And when you use us, you have to use our SDK, and you use us in your code. You write your code, your features, and you flag them in your code. And all the feature flag rules and the evaluated values of those flags are actually stored in memory in your system. And the nice thing about that is you're not making a request back to us, right? If it's not going to slow down your system, because it's just pulling it straight out of your memory. And there's different ways to deploy that as well. By default, it's stored in memory, but you could have a local cache, for instance, if you wanted to put it into a Redis cache. You could have what's called a relay proxy that allows you to basically have kind of a localized instance of LaunchDarkly, so that you can minimize things if, for instance, if the connection to LaunchDarkly was ever severed, we went down, your app will still run, because it's gonna basically evaluate the flags that are in memory at that point. If you have things like a proxy, that's even better, because then you could actually have all the flags there, and you could manipulate the flags manually if you really wanted to be able to run entirely without LaunchDarkly at all. And then the other thing that's really unique about us is we stream our changes. So the neat thing about us is there's this this whole thing here where we can propagate changes that people make. If you toggle a flag, we will propagate those changes to all of your clients, whether it's mobile, desktop, web, IoT, whatever, within 200 milliseconds. And what'll happen is those rule changes or those will propagate in your system. Your system will reevaluate the flag and then display it to the users. So yeah, that's the high level picture for the architecture. I guess, you guys up for a demo?
Always.
Yeah.
Always is my answer.
Always, yes.
Before we jump in, Young, do you want to give us a recap real quick? Who are we? What are we doing? Anybody who just joined the stream? What have you watched?
So for anyone that just joined us on the stream, this is Howdy Partner, where we highlight our partners and what they do, anything cool that they're doing, demos and everything. Today we have Rich here with us from LaunchDarkly. He's going to shortly show us a little bit of a demo of how LaunchDarkly works with the feature flagging and other stuff. We just went over, I guess before all this, I had a little demo on AWS Amplify, which is a service that we provide for you application developers, web or mobile developers to be able to use AWS as a backend resource to create that full stack app. And Rich just kind of went over a short presentation on LaunchDarkly and what it provides. And I guess we will jump onto the demo.
One real important thing, real quick. We're live, so please ask us questions right here in chat. Go ahead and anything that you see Rich doing that you don't understand or you want more information on, we will interrupt Rich very, very rudely.
Okay. Anytime. Feel free to do that.
All
right. So what you're looking at here are basically a list of all the SDKs that we support. If I saw there's some chatter earlier about C#, yes, we support C#. Are there, like, in the audience, is there any language that you guys use today that's not on this page? I know someone's going to say COBOL, and I know we prototyped that, but we haven't released it. But yeah, I'd be curious.
How about Rust?
Rust, yes. So we have an engineer who wrote a Rust SDK. I don't know what the status of it is. The last time I saw that he was very close to having it feature complete. So I suspect probably before I don't know when. Probably before the end of this season, there will be a Rust SDK.
That's a ton of SDKs.
Even Roku, right? I'm like crazy. Yeah. If you have a Roku. The latest one that we released is Lua, and that one's really cool. Like it opens up a lot of interesting use cases with Nginx. Like, how you could feature flag stuff in Nginx. And then earlier you're talking, Young, you're talking about Amplify, the React stuff. We have a React SDK and React Native, and yeah. So anyway, if you don't see something here, please type it in the chat, and we'll take a look at it.
I guess somebody was asking a question about segment, but I guess there is a segment integration now.
Segment, yes. Yes, there is a segment integration. And so earlier we were looking at, I believe it was this one. So we'll talk about this later with experiment when we get into experimentation a little bit deeper. But one of the things you could do is, LaunchDarkly, our SDKs track a lot of stuff, right? They could track user behavior, like on a web app, like you click on stuff. You could do all kinds of custom tracking that you might want to track in your app. But we also just track things like, what value of the feature did we serve to user A, for instance, right? Well, all of that information can be exported. We have a data export service that can stream that out to basically any, like we do it through Kinesis. Segment is one of the outputs, but the value of that is like you could actually have your data science team take that data and integrate it with your existing analytics platform, whatever that may be. and use it to enhance your existing data about your users. So you could see exactly what your users are seeing, what kind of what features they're experiencing, right? So it's not such a random thing like, oh, I've got 20% of my users seeing this feature. No, this will tell you exactly who is seeing that feature and when they saw it. So so we do have an integration with Segment that allows you to output to any number of sources. All right, so let's get into a demo. So let me see if I can move this thing here a little bit. So we're going to get into, so we have a bunch of code samples that we created earlier this year on Glitch. If you've never used Glitch before, it's kind of a really fun tool to be able to build web apps. And it's all online. It's all done in the browser, which is really cool. And so we have a bunch of projects in here, and I created one for Howdy Partner. And
Glitch.
Yeah.
Yes, we're famous.
Made it.
Exactly. And so we have this, so I don't know, everything with LaunchDarkly is space oriented. So we have this app called Space Camp, and it's basically a pricing page. It's got two product tiers, and it's just a Python Flask app. So let's go ahead and edit that. And by the way, so like this is just a fork of a glitch that we have in our tutorial. So if you go to docs.launchdarkly.com and go to the guides section, and this is basically the tutorial for your first flag. And this is something I wrote earlier in the year that goes through all of this, and we're going to go through that live. So Space Camp, very simple Python Flask app. What we're going to do is, and let's show that side by side. So this is the Space Camp app right here. It's vertical now. I got a nice little star field background there, which is pretty cool. And I'm going to close out. It's kind of distracting. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the LaunchDarkly SDK. And since we're using Python, we're going to use the Python SDK. So let's start with adding our SDK. And our SDK for Python is called LaunchDarkly Server SDK. And we have two types of SDKs. So we have server SDKs and we have client SDKs. And we'll get through that. So right now we're using the server SDK because we are building a server-side app. And I had this glitch set up to basically install those requirements. So whatever I put in the requirements file, it should get installed. Let me just make sure. Yep, there it is. It got installed. Sorry, I have to move stuff around to be able to see all my entire page here. So we got that installed. Next thing we're going to do is we only have one Python file in here. It's called serverpy. And since we're showing that, this is the live app right now. What we're going to do is we're going to import the SDK. It's called LD Client, LaunchDarkly Client. That imports it. And just to let you know, before this, I actually added the SDK key because you do have to obtain an SDK key for your account. I added it in the .env file here. I'm not going to show that because that kind of exposes some secrets, which I don't want to share to the world.
Gotta keep it secret. Got to keep it safe.
Exactly. So let's see. LD client .set. Sorry, I'm typing and talking at the same time, but OS get env and LD SDK key. That should get us the LD SDK key from the environment. And then we're going to initialize our LD client from LD client.get. All right, so now we have this client right here. This is what we're going to interact with. So inherently, that doesn't really do anything. So that just basically prepares the SDK So like if you go on here, nothing, I refresh that, nothing's happening. So what we're going to do, there's some to-dos here. We're going to implement the feature flag right here. So delete that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to define a user, because when you're feature flagging, you want to have a way to define who the user is. Like our app today doesn't have a login, right? So we're just going to define an anonymous user.
Can I recommend AWS Amplify? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You need to add a user login.
There you go. No worries.
My friend Young can tell you more about it. Go ahead. Sorry for.
No worries. So, okay, AWS Amplify is our user, okay? But we are going to tag them as an anonymous user, okay? Because
Wonderful.
in this app today, right now, there's no login. Everyone's going to be the same user, so that's fine, right? The next thing we're going to do is, by the way, so what we're going to do essentially is we're going to add a third tier, right? So that third tier lives. So if we look at these are our templates, our views. So you have a pricing HTML page here, and whoever wrote this code did a really good job, because look how clean this is. You got tier 1, tier 2. There's even a to-do for tier 3, right? So like if we uncomment that, right? Let's see what happens if we uncomment it. There's our third tier right there, the Admiral class, right? So, but what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this whole tier 3 in a feature flag, because we don't want everyone to see it, right? So, so let's comment that back up and
Can I ask real quick? So that's a templating language, right? Is that Jinja? Is that what that is?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So this is a default one that comes with Flask. Flask is the Python web framework that we're using, and it is Jinja. Yeah. So, okay, go back to server Pi. So we have our user, and then we have our render template. Well, now we got to evaluate the flag. So let's go to LaunchDarkly. Feature flags right here. So this is LaunchDarkly. We got to get some oohs and ahs here. So anyway, this is LaunchDarkly. Let me bump up the font size there. We have 3 feature flags, right? And so basically you can switch environments, and these are all the different environments. This is just our sandbox account. I have a Space Camp test environment. That's what we're going to use. We're not going to use production, just test. And these are feature flags. So if I want to create a flag, I would go in here and create a new flag. I already have a flag called pricing tier 3. Pretty cool, right? It's on. Actually, I'm going to turn that off, because I want to see, I want you to see the actual toggling of it. So we're going to copy that. So this is the key for that feature flag. We're going to use that in our code. So let's go back to here. And let's create a new variable called isTier3 enabled. And then we're going to obtain the value of that flag through our LD client. And the method call is variation, LD client variation. And then this is our feature flag key, right? And then the second parameter in that is the user, because it always needs a user. And then a default value. So in the default value here, and this is the default value is only used if it can't obtain a value from LaunchDarkly. So this is in the case where, like, if LaunchDarkly went down, it would use the default value, assuming that it doesn't have anything in memory already. Okay, so so there's that. But now we have to pass that into our template. So how do you pass that into your template? Very easily.
When we're talking about user and key, in the case of an anonymous user, would you set the key to the name of the application, perhaps? Like what would be a good identifier?
Yeah, you're right. Good question, because as a matter of fact, we've actually thought about like changing our documentation and our APIs a bit, because user is not necessarily a user, like a person. It could be whatever you want, right? It's just basically a unique identifier by which you would want to store a unique flag for.
Okay. So this
Right?
this is how you would target like specific entities, let's just say, something like that, right? Like
Yeah,
say,
absolutely. You could do that. You could also provide things like email, right?
Oh,
And you could put all kinds of custom properties on here and use that as a means of targeting users.
got it.
So, and we'll go through an example of that later. I'll show you how that all works.
Awesome.
But yeah, in this case, our user is always going to be the same. Well, we're just going to say, okay, it's Amplify, AWS Amplify. And the next thing is we need to pass that variable to equals. This is kind of a weird syntax here, but I'm so used to like JavaScript where you don't have to type in that equals that. But anyway, so now it's being passed in, right? But okay, we're passing it in. Is anything happening? Well, we're getting a 500 error. Did we break it? What did we break? Let's look.
I think you have an extra underscore there somewhere, right?
Oh yeah, is tier 3 enabled?
Yeah.
Good
there
eye,
you go.
Young. Good
Yeah.
eye.
See, I love that. This is like pair programming. Awesome. So like we still have two tiers. That's great. Now let's look at like adding the third tier. Okay, now we got to wrap this sucker, right? So how do we do that? In Jinja, you do this brace % syntax. If is tier 3 enabled equals true, then do that %, and if. All right, let's see if that works. So, all right, it auto refresh itself. It's still turned off, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go to LaunchDarkly. I'm going to put that on the side. I'm going to put this guy on the side, just so you know that I'm not tricking you. So I'm going to turn that on. I'm not going to leave a comment. Just turn it on. And what went wrong? Did I type something in wrong? See, live demos, they never work, man.
Never. But that's the joy. We get to see you troubleshoot, because we never get to see anyone troubleshoot in real life.
Yeah. All right. So first things first. Let's look. Okay, I'm looking at the rules defined in pricing tier 3, because it's very possible that if you have it turned on, you can still serve a false. Like these are, we'll go through the rules here, but like you could say, like if I had this set to false, even though it's turned on, it would still serve false as its default rule. But like it's set to true, so that's fine. That should work. Okay, is tier 3 enabled? LD client variation pricing tier. Did I spell that right? Pricing tier 3. Let me just make sure I typed all this stuff in right. Okay, pricing equals. Oh, duh. I had comments on this thing still.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God.
All right. See, there you go. All right, there you go.
Oh,
now
hey.
it's on.
3 tiers.
And then, yeah, and then now I have to refresh because it's a server side, right? If it was client side, I wouldn't have to refresh, because why? Because we stream our changes out, right? So on the server, those changes are still being streamed over to our service, but so our SDK is using server side events for the streaming side. So the server's getting those values streamed to it. It's not like it's going out and polling, or like it's not going out and fetching the value the time you refresh. Those are on demand, right? Like as I change it, it's, the service is getting that, and then you refresh, it's there. So, okay, nice, right? So let's see, what else do we show here? Okay, so let's look at this flag a little bit. So you saw that I added this code, server pi. I added this this variation call here, and there's our flag name. Here's what's cool. So like one of the things that happens, you can imagine like over time, you're going to pepper your code with all these flag calls everywhere, and it's just going to get cluttered, right? You're going to have hundreds of these if you don't clean them up, right? These can be long-lived, right? So one of the things that we have in LaunchDarkly is, what happened? I navigated off of that. Let's go back to here. We have these things called code references. And check this out.
Oh, wow.
After I wrote that out, it knew that I actually coded that in here. Now, this is not using GitHub, right? It's not using it is underneath, like Glitch uses Git. So I've wired up this Git repository to update LaunchDarkly to let it know, like, we have this tool called LD Code Refs that goes out and tells us your code. Like it looks for flags and it tells us where they are. So this makes it really easy to go out and say, okay, is this flag still being used, and where's the code? So like when it comes time to cleaning things up, you know exactly where things are. Very useful. Yeah. So, all right. So there's that. So that's the basics of LaunchDarkly, right? You've got your user, your flag call, pretty basic. Let's get into something a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to go into like.
I want to ask chat real quick. Who's using feature flags like this today? Tell us about how you're using feature flags. Are you using them just like how Rich showed us before we get into some of these more advanced use cases of feature flags? Tell us more about how you're using feature flags today, and I want to hear more. I'm interested. Sorry, Rich, go ahead.
I guess we have a question on the chat. How do you link the repo to LaunchDarkly?
Oh, yeah. So, okay, that was a little bit of magic I pulled on you, right? Okay, this is cool. So, if you go to the terminal here, there is a, whoops. Where is it? Oh, shoot. Where did I put that? LD code. Well, anyway, there is I'll show you in off of here. Where did I do it? Oh, right here. There's the documentation. Link to the documentation. There is this thing called LD find code refs. Oh, that's why I wasn't completing. Typed it in wrong. And this will link you to GitHub to LD find code refs. This is basically a utility that we wrote that scans your code and will tell us where your flags are in your code, right? And you could there's turnkey configuration options. So like GitHub, use GitHub or any of these other systems. To like GitHub Actions is cool because all you have to do is add the action onto your GitHub repository and it'll start working. So every time you commit to master, it'll go in and add it, and then it automatically just keeps your LaunchDarkly in sync with your code. For me, because we're using Glitch, I am just running a command manually, and I have a cron job basically that goes out and updates, that runs that command to update LaunchDarkly. And so the command looks something like, oh shoot, where is it? Where is, examples. Here's some examples. So if you, Yeah, so basically it looks kind of like this. You have to provide your access token, your project key, repository name, and a few other things. And then it'll go out and scan your code, look for tokens that look like LaunchDarkly flags, and basically send it over to us. And then, depending on your code, like we support all the ones that we, for all the SDKs that we support. But like you could customize it as well. Like these are just looking at strings, like tokens, and you can change the delimiters and things like that, and add like ignore files and different types of directories. It's pretty primitive. We are looking at another way to do it that would probably be a lot more accurate. But for the most part, you could tweak this to work pretty well with your code. Yeah, so we're huge fans of this, obviously, because like we use this to check out how, if we have flags out there when we're doing a cleanup of stuff, where it's being used in the code. If this is empty, then you can pretty much be almost guaranteed that there's no usage in your code. You can delete it or archive the flag. All right, so let's go back to here. And okay, I pulled up a version of the code. Actually, it's this one. This is the fifth iteration of this that has like experimentation turned on. So what does this look like? So let's launch this app. I'm going to close that one, and I'm going to close that one. So this looks almost the same, right? We have the 3 tiers on our pricing page, but now I have a login, right? And that's my email address if you want to email me. The reason is we added a login is so that we can use a real user, right? So like here's our code, here's our new code, right? So there's a lot more stuff in here now. It's gonna be a little bit harder to follow. But we added, like now we have a cookie. We use Gravatar for the avatar. Our code from before is very similar. We still have this anonymous part, but now we're getting an email through the session. This is not real login. This is like some crazy fake login. So like I'll show you. If I log out and let's log back in, and rich@rich.com. Log in. There's no password for sure. It just goes in and basically creates a session cookie with that email address stored in it. Very secure. And it goes in and it basically, yeah, don't do this in real life. It goes in and creates a new user hash now, right, with your email address, with my email address. And now we have 2 flags in here. So we have this discount pricing flag, and then we have our tier 3 enabled, right? And then this discount pricing flag looks like an actual discount flag. So this is not a Boolean anymore, right? So this is what we call multivariate flag. And I'll show you what that looks like. I guess now let's look at that.
Not to derail again too, Rich, but like back to the user thing, another question I was thinking through is like, would it be useful to put something like an IP address? Could you do something like geo, like turn on this feature just for certain geos based off IP address?
Yes, absolutely. So like if you go into our SDKs, let's just look at our server-side SDK for Node. Where is here, attributes. So certain things, as you know, like you could send a whole bunch of different types of attributes, right? So let's see, customizing client. I forget where we put that. But anyway, in here, let's see, in your attributes. Oh, here they are. So these are the standard set of attributes that we support
IP.
at the top level. IP, first name, last name, country, email, avatar, name, anonymous. right? Like email, for instance, you may not. I mean, there are some things here that there may be like some PII issues, right? You might not want to expose those. But we have this thing called private user attributes. They get sent to us, but we don't store them, right? And you could still use them for targeting, but they're not stored at all.
Cool.
Yeah, so like, here's something that you may want, like an idea of like what you might send. So you can have like a custom group that may be geography, right? Or whatever you might want to target against. So you can create whatever you want on that.
Can you use like a public endpoint? URL, things like that?
You want, if you want to store like a public like a URL or resource as a property? Yeah. Oh yeah, it's whatever you want to store in here. You can okay. throw at us. Yeah, and I think there is a limit to how much you can send, but it's really large. And at that point, you might want to question yourself whether or not it's really appropriate to be sending us all that information. So,
why are you using these things? Like, are you actually using them? Type thing.
For targeting, yeah.
Right.
So we talked about student discount pricing. This is our second flag, and so this, as I said, is a multivariate flag. So we have 4 variations. So what we're going to use this variation for is to control the price. So like we have these Bitcoin prices here. And I don't know why we have the dollar sign. That kind of doesn't make sense if it's Bitcoin and then there's a dollar sign. All right, so we have these variations. 20.25 is going to give you 75% off, 0.5, 50% off, and so on and so forth. And then we'll look at the targeting. And so this is where you could target. You could say like, okay, if my user is a .edu user, their email ends at .edu, like for a student, we're going to start on a percentage rollout, right? And we're just going to do like 25%, kind of randomly across all of that, like for all users with a .edu. So as you saw here, I'm a .com, so you can see 10,000, 25,000, 100,000, right? If I log out and let's log in, I don't know, AWS Amplify at aws.com or .edu. Oh, I got rejected. Oh, you know what? This is not turned on. So you're going to get those same prices. So let's turn it on, save the change, and let's refresh that. Now you see looks like we got the 50% off discount, right? So anyway, the reason why I wanted to show this is because this is actually, we're not going to go through all the code here. It's there's a lot of code in here for log in, log out, and what we're passing into the templates and things like that. But I want to show this because this is a scenario where you may want to use it to run an experiment, right? And maybe this experiment is kind of weak. It's just that, we want to figure out, if you're a student, which chair you're most likely to click on, to want. Right? Do you want like a freighter class, or like if you give you a big enough discount, would you actually select the Admiral class? Right? Those are questions we want to answer. And so the hard part is this is just a standalone app, right? That I created. No one's actually using this. So how are we going to generate data for this? Well, conveniently, I have a secret shortcut key that will basically simulate a bunch of users using this. Basically, the way this is wired up, let's look at how this is wired up. So we've defined a metric called student pricing tier. And this is just a click metric, right? So it's a click metric, and it's going to be listening and looking for events on the buttons on here, and we have a button in the selector class for it as a.button, right? And so the SDK is now listening for that. We have the client-side SDK on here installed, and if any of these 3 buttons that gets clicked on, it's going to track that. So I have a shortcut key that basically will trigger a whole bunch of. Actually, before that happens, I'll show you. We have this neat little feature here called a debugger inside of LaunchDarkly. So we'll just leave that up and running. It could take a little while. It could take about 30 seconds to see that something's going on. But we'll go ahead and fire off a simulation. You'll see the URLs like rapidly changing just to guarantee that we're getting like uniques. And then we get all these like XHR requests, right? Like these are tracking calls. Let's go in here. Oh, you see, okay, here's our debugger. So one flag is getting evaluated. So we have 82 evaluations and our student pricing discounts are being called. And then this shows you like, okay, the percentage of the values that are getting evaluated. And you can also look at the experimentation events. Here it is. And there's a whole bunch of stuff coming through. And it'll tell you like who clicked on what. So like this one, like it'll tell you like these just random.edu accounts, right? Some are .com, some edus. So why are we looking at that? Well, I wanted to run that because I wanted to show the experimentation side of things. Like, so we just ran this experimentation. We have a tab here called experiments. And let's expand this a bit. This is currently recording. It's a click event, and we started this actually a long time ago. So there's, you can ignore it's not able to calculate the confidence interval right away. Like this is stuff that's been running for a while. So what you'll see here is that we have a big conversion on the 25% off discount, but we're not entirely sure about that yet. Right, because the statistical significance is not there yet. So this needs to run a little bit longer. So we, if you're a data scientist, this will kind of make sense to you, like, the different p-values and running simple ABN tests. This is a great way to be able to use this product as well. And it'll show you things like, the conversion rates over time. So yeah, and then there was also like, you can see like some additional insights. And, like I said, this is a demo app. So like, it's not going to show you anything in the last 60 days, but let's say the last 24 hours. You can kind of see like what variations of the flag you're getting, your customers are getting, or your users are getting over time. So pretty sophisticated stuff. But yeah, that's the main parts of LaunchDarkly. One other thing I'd like to show, if we have time.
Totally. Are you able to? I want to ask real quick. Are you able to export that data too if you want to process it somewhere else?
Oh, absolutely. Remember earlier we talked about data export. Oh
yeah. That's right.
So yeah, one of the things that you could do is you can go into settings and you could turn on, actually it's already turned on, data export. So nice. You could be exporting this, and I don't have a demo set up right now, but like you could hook this up to Segment. Like if you would go into integrations, and by the way, we have a bunch of different integrations with a whole bunch of different providers, nice. And Segment is one of them. And actually, there's already a bunch of stuff in here. I don't know. I'll just look into one of these. But basically, you tell it like which environment you want to export, your right key, and it'll get sent to Segment. And then from there, you can do with it whatever you want. You can send it to Amplify. You can send it to whoever. Yeah. So one thing we didn't really talk about much is the client side. And actually, this is my favorite part, is the client side, because, you guys were talking about AWS Amplify earlier, and you're looking at a React example. Well, what if you wanted to use LaunchDarkly on a purely client-side application, like a single-page app? Well, you could do that. We're not going to write one today, but I will show you a tester app like we have. So our SDK actually has, we wrote this, our developers wrote this test app. And we actually use this just, to make sure things are working. I'm going to go in and I'm going to paste in my client-side ID, which is okay. It's not like a secret, because this is something that you can basically find on your, like if you view source of a website uses LaunchDarkly, you can find our client-side ID. So we're going to enable live updates, streaming, and evaluation reasons, and let's just leave that the same, the test user case, and update configuration connect. And so here's our student discount pricing. Now you only see one flag coming through. Why is that? Well, flag, you don't like, if you have a whole bunch of flags, you're not exposing all those out to the client side, right? Because there could be some security things, right? Like you don't want to inadvertently like expose that, oh, you're thinking about releasing a third pricing tier, right? And now your customers can go out and actually see that in your code. So one of the things you could do is you can go in and edit here and say, make this flag available to client-side SDKs. Okay, so let's save that. This is pricing tier 3, because this is a confirmation. Just add that comment. And how did that happen? I didn't actually save any. I didn't refresh the page. Did you guys see me refresh the page?
No, nothing up your screen.
All right. So this is cool. So watch this. I'm going to turn that off. Pay attention to that true flag, right? Boom. Oh, wow. Like that.
Wow.
False. Yeah. So this is streaming. And if you wanted to see more how this works, let me copy this again, because when I refresh, oh, no, actually it didn't. It kept it. So, event stream. Here it is, event stream. So this is using server-side events, and it's going through the browser's event stream channel. So you'll see down here that there's going to be a new one as I change it. It's kind of like WebSockets, but way more efficient, right? And a patch came through. There's the flag that changed, and reasons and whatnot. So really cool stuff. All of our SDKs work exactly the same way in terms of using server-side events for the streaming side. The big difference between the server-side and client-side events is the server-side SDK is that the server-side SDK actually manages all the users in your system, right? Whereas the client-side SDK only deals with the user that's using that application at the time. So that's pretty much the big difference. I
think that feature where you include the flags in the client side explicitly is really useful, because data mining is a real thing. It's very easy to go data mine a bunch of front end code and try and figure out what's coming. People do this with video games all the time too, right? This might even benefit a gaming company as well. I just saw the other day they're re-releasing the Tony Hawk Pro Skater game remastered, which it's just I'm wearing a Vans hat, please. I am a walking stereotype. But they've already started data mining this demo that they just put out, and releasing all these secrets and things that the team probably hadn't wanted to come out yet. And this stuff happens. This stuff is real. It's totally cool to be able to toggle these things on and off.
Oh, absolutely. Fortnite uses us.
Oh, cool.
And I remember when I think it was like I don't remember which version it was, or what it was like. There was I think sometime in the fall or something. They announced something, and a whole bunch of people downloaded Fortnite, and we saw this huge spike on our services. It's like, wow, so many people use Fortnite. It's crazy. I had a coworker who's also been kind of toying around with Unity. To try and get LaunchDarkly to work inside of Unity, which would be pretty cool.
That would be
but
cool.
Yeah, there's so many cool things you can use it with, right? And not necessarily just for launching features. You could use it like, I know a lot of customers who use it to manage configuration, including ourselves, right? We use it for entitlements even, right? So like if we wanted to bump a customer up from one product level to another, right? That's we could basically do that all in feature flags.
This was something you were telling me about that really kind of struck my mind as really interesting. Something I hadn't considered before. Using feature flags to enable permissions, right? Like I used to work at Box, for example, right? Like and we did a lot of document permissions. Like enabling and revoking permissions to a document is complicated. It's not easy to do. Using feature flags for it never entered my mind. That's actually kind of an interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll show you like another feature. Actually, we just released. So like another thing. So like I showed you targeting, right? I showed you targeting of flags. So like in here, you could say, okay, if your email ends with that, or you could say, let's add another rule. If it's rich, then do this, right? But another type of targeting rule is called a segment. So say if you have a bunch of users and there's no particular rule common, right? Like say I want to add YouTube plus someone else at Amazon or whatever, but there's nothing in common that I can choose. I could hard code your guys's like IDs in here, like your keys. I could hard code those in here. But another way I can define it is I could create a segment. And a segment, like in this case, like a beta user, and I could go in here and say, okay, I want this user and another user, or I could exclude users, and then I could add that segment to a rule. But another thing that we've just released like a few weeks ago is scheduled changes, which is pretty cool.
We actually had a request from chat too from LocoDev to make the client side button bigger, please. LocoDev added a please in there. So,
Oh, client side button where? I'm sorry, where?
Yeah,
I
think
on the settings. Okay, that's good feedback. Good feedback. Yeah, so we have this thing called scheduled changes now. So like you could actually go in and say, I'm going to add this user, but we only want them on this segment for, I don't know, for till Monday, right? And save that. And the cool thing, the use cases that opens up is that you might want to say, like for your support people, right? Ghosting. I don't know how many apps, every service out there probably has some way to ghost a real user, right? For support cases, right? You need to be able to like access someone's account as them. And so you could use this potentially. Your DevOps team can say, okay, I'm going to grant access to our support person for 2 days to be able to diagnose and troubleshoot the support issue, right? And you say that, and that gets scheduled for removal. You can also do that across on the flags itself. So like, if I go into the flag here, I can go in and let's say I want to change this to be, I don't know, 50%, and actually not 50%. Let's say, I don't know, 35%. Whoops, 35%. And then one of these will be like, I don't know, 15. And so one of the things I could do is I could schedule that change. I can say, okay, don't make this available until next week. So you could use it for feature launches ahead of time. So you don't have to go in here and turn the flag on at that specific moment. You can actually schedule these forward, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Let's see. I mean, that's the gist of LaunchDarkly in a nutshell. I don't know how much more time we've got, but like, I'm happy to take on questions or show other things if people would like to see them.
I have a really important question. It's actually probably the most important question you'll ever get about LaunchDarkly. If LaunchDarkly were a condiment, which condiment would it be and why? This is a question from me, by the way, not from chat.
A condiment. Oh,
yeah, which
man.
condiment would you all be?
Oh man, not mustard, because that's kind of divisive. There are a lot of people who don't like mustard.
Got it.
I would think that we would be closer to ketchup because ketchup's fairly well accepted. You know,
Okay.
you want to put, you know, it's something that you'd want to use and put on everything, right?
It's very Canadian of you. That's very Canadian of you, by the way. I don't know if you are Canadian, Rich.
No, I'm not.
Okay, that like ketchup is revered in Canada. Maybe not universally, but they have ketchup flavored potato chips, for example.
I was just gonna say that I had some from Whole Foods like a couple of weeks ago. It's super good.
Okay, Jess has your back too. Jess has your back here. She answered. She says jelly because we are sweet and you all go well with peanut butter, which peanut butter is the web in this case.
Okay.
I love it. I love that. That's wonderful.
Sounds good.
I'm a big jelly fan. What's the difference between jelly and jam? Like I've been wondering this a long time, but that's probably not a question for.
I don't know. I always thought it was like a consistency. Like jam tends to be like, sometimes they call them preserves, right? It actually has real fruit in it, whereas jelly is just clear. Looks like Jell-O.
I don't even know. I don't know. Okay. Again, Jess has our backs here too. Consistency. Jam is thicker. All right.
All right.
I've always wondered. Thank you, Jess.
I'm glad Jess knows.
Cool. Young, did you have any questions for Rich?
I guess as somebody who's not familiar with LaunchDarkly, how would they start? How would they experiment? You know, get familiar with the service? Is it just a matter of going to the doc, looking at the GitHub repo, and starting that way?
Yeah. So first, go to LaunchDarkly.com and start a free trial. Okay, that was number one.
Okay.
Start a free trial. Go through the whole trial thing, and then you can go to our docs. Where is it? Docs.launchdarkly.com, and then you can go in here and follow the docs. There's a creating a feature flag, getting started guide, and I'll walk you through basically how it all works. If you want to go through the glitch demo that I showed, that would be under guides, tutorials, creating your first flag. So it's very similar to the other getting started guide, but this one's a lot more hands-on, and it kind of goes through it and it shows you the glitch app, the Space Camp app, and then from here you could actually go in and copy the project and go through the whole thing, which is kind of fun.
We lost your video there, Rich. I don't know what happened.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
You lost my
No, just your video.
My sharing?
Not your. We could still see your screen. We can't see you.
Oh, that's weird.
Oh well.
Yeah. I have no idea. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, cool. Yeah, those are great. I also dropped the links in chat as well if you want to go ahead and try out those resources that you just listed. I'll move away from the camera or from your screen so you can maybe fix the camera there.
Yeah, I'm trying to. That's kind of odd.
No
I don't
worries.
even see you guys anymore.
It's okay. Maybe your internet is giving you some trouble. It's live stream. That's the whole thing.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, you're back.
Ah, there you go. What happened there?
The power of the internet. That's what happened. We willed you back into existence. I think you stopped existing there for a minute.
I don't know. Black hole.
Might be the smoke in Northern California. It could be anything, really.
It's true. We're like suffocating over here today.
Okay, so
Excellent.
we talked about the one thing that we didn't talk about that you had mentioned that I thought was another really kind of advanced and more interesting use case around feature flags was database migrations. That was something, I don't know if you want to talk maybe for a few minutes. You don't have to show anything, but just talk us through like what that means, how you would use it for a database migration.
So like I said, we're like compiling a whole set of use cases our customers use LaunchDarkly for. And early on, one of them is database migrations. So a typical database migration, every developer in their lifetime will probably face some sort of migration, like data migration or service migration, some sort of infrastructure migration, right? And that's something that you want to orchestrate really well, right? If you were to do it, let's just say you're just transferring databases. You're switching from Postgres on your own instance to RDS or something, right? Well, you're going to have to figure out how to get all that data over and keep them in sync, and eventually cut over. And if you have a highly trafficked website, you may not want to take it down to do that migration, which is typically what used to be done in the past, right? Like before services were really all that important, right? Like people didn't have SLO times to have to kind of meet. So now you can't really do that. If you're going to migrate, you need to do it in real time. It's like, you have to refill. You need to refuel mid-flight, right? A 747, and so it comes with a lot of risks. And so LaunchDarkly feature flags are actually a really great tool for mitigating that risk a little. So one of the ways you could do it is like, say, let's take our example, like taking a Postgres database, a localized Postgres database that you're running on your own servers and migrating it over to RDS or to something else. That doesn't matter. First thing you want to do is you probably want to do dual writes, right? Continue writing to your existing Postgres environment, and then also at the same time in the back end, kind of writing to RDS without actually using RDS, but you'd have dual writes. And then you might want to just verify, like make sure that the data is getting stored the way you want it to be stored, and do a bunch of tests. And then also start looking at performance. Make sure that those writes aren't degrading your performance. So you might want to do a progressive release on that as well. So like maybe do a percentage-based rollout on those dual writes rather than like doing like, hey, I'm going to start writing to this new database with all of my users. But you start slowly ratchet that up until you could verify that all the writes are working. Next thing you do is you start doing reads. So you might do dual reads, and you could have a feature flag that says, okay, I want to introduce reading from the new database, the RDS database, but to a small percentage of my users, right? Maybe even just you guys, like your team. And you start reading from that database, make sure everything's coming out okay, and then slowly ratchet that up, right? And then there's potentially going to be and this is a very simplified example, right? There could be like very complicated. This is like a basic CRUD based database example, but you can kind of see we have a guide on this in our docs.
Yeah, Jess just linked it. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, you could just basically go in and it's pretty well detailed in terms of how you would do it, and it's just a strategy for sure. It's not like here's exactly how you do it. It's just suggesting a strategy for how you might do it. Yeah, so there's use cases like that.
Sounds like schema changes might be the same, approach as well, right? Like when you're using like an ORM tool, like you get with Ruby or with C# or something within any framework, and you got to make changes to the models, right? And that'll change the SQL schemas. Do the same thing. Just use a feature flag for the cutover, right? Like, hey, we're gonna send traffic, to this one for 50% of the time, this other one to 50% of the time for a set amount of time. You can even schedule it now, it sounds like, too, with the new scheduling feature.
That's absolutely. Yeah, it's a whole idea, like, again, disconnecting your deploy and release from each other so that you could be very particular about like what it is you actually want to release. Especially today, there are a lot of companies that are still operating on monolith code bases. And some of them are actually deliberately wanting to operate in a monolith.
I always say monolith is not a bad word. A lot of people give like monoliths. That's sometimes the fastest way to get to market when you're building a new product. That, if you were, let's say you're building something from scratch, most people think, oh, I automatically go to microservices. You may not even know what to break out into a microservice before you've built anything, right? So building it all in one, launching it, getting it out in front of people, and then figuring out which services need to be broken apart is actually sometimes an easier approach.
Absolutely. Service-oriented architectures are really cool, but like at the same time, they come with their challenges as well. If you need to just even like onboarding new engineers, for instance, right? Like that's a big problem. Like if you're a service-oriented place architecture and just like knowing where the code is, what it's doing, it's really hard to like try and train yourself to what's going on if you're only looking at a piece of it. So
everything's got its place, once you start getting bigger teams, it definitely makes sense to start breaking apart these things into services that don't rely on each other to be, deployed and updated and things like that. You get more agility that way, right? But I think the team's small. I don't think a monolith is a wrong choice in some cases. Sounds like you can control a lot too through some feature flags. It's interesting, these aren't even necessarily what I would deem features, right? Some of these things that we're talking about are things that users would never even know were there, right? I think that's a really interesting distinction to make.
Well, as a matter of fact, if you look at, we track feature flags, our own use of it, and like just looking at like the landscape of feature flags that customers use, most of the feature flags that people create aren't client-side feature flags. They're server-side feature flags. And some of it may be controlling things that users actually see, and some of it probably doesn't. There are a lot of back-end type things that are used, we use feature flags for that users will never see. Yeah. There may be a user impact in the end, but like it's not something that they will notice right away.
Cool. I think we're getting close to time here. Young already asked a variation of this question, so I don't want to get too repetitive, but I dropped the getting started link for anybody. I urge you to go check out LaunchDarkly. Rich, any words of wisdom for somebody who clicks on that link what should they do after they click on that link and get their first flag going?
Reach out to us, Twitter, whatever, and let us know how it goes. And, if it was intuitive or not. We're trying to improve that user experience. Onboarding is certainly a challenge with a lot of these tools where, your first experience with a tool like this is going to be the SDK and documentation, right? So that's always a challenge. And so for my team in particular, that's something that we want to make sure that we're doing a really good job on.
Yeah, just like Jess says too, tweet about it, right? Tag LaunchDarkly in your tweet. Let them know what you ran into. All right, so Young, let's wrap up. Let's tell people, we've got more of these shows coming up. I'll go check the calendar as you tell people what Howdy Partner is, why they should keep watching if they're just joining. What do we have in store for people?
Yeah, well, if you're just joining us, unfortunately, we are up in time for today. But just to recap today, we had Rich here from LaunchDarkly. He had a really cool demo for us on feature flagging. Showed us mostly on the server side, a little bit of client side at the end. Also talked about different use cases, interesting use cases, how to get started if you haven't already started using LaunchDarkly. And to wrap things up, Howdy Partner is a show where we promote our partners, have them on the show, talk about their product, do a cool demo. We actually also did a demo earlier today with AWS Amplify, a way to use your front-end app and being able to deploy it on the cloud using AWS as a back-end resource. And correct me if I'm wrong, our next show is on Monday. I don't know the date, I'm sorry. Next Monday.
August 24th.
24th, yeah. And we will have Swerve on as our partner. So
yeah,
if
our friend Mo
if
is there.
Follow, yeah,
if you love Mo, come watch. If you don't love Mo, watch anyway. Everybody loves Mo.
And if you want to keep track of who we are going to have on our partner, just general things about the show, follow me, follow AM, follow Mo.
Yes.
And save that link, twitch.tv/AWS.
That's right. And we generally try and stream every Monday and every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific. We also, if you go click down into the video section here too on Twitch, have all the older episodes that we've done there for you to watch on demand as well. And if you just missed this episode, you can go watch it there too. It'll be up there in just a little bit. So we got to thank you, Rich, so much for coming out, showing us all about LaunchDarkly and spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I had a ton of fun.
All right. Should we do our sign off? We always pick a phrase to do a sign off with, and it's out of 3 phrases. And I guarantee you I will forget one of them. It's almost the sign off itself now for me to forget one of the phrases. It's a Western themed. So we say happy trails. Y'all come back now you hear. Or
giddy up, I think.
Giddy up, yes. We got all 3, man. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. So, Rich, you get to pick out of those 3. How do we sign off?
Oh, how about y'all come back now?
A true Southerner. I love it. True Western greeting there. All right, cool. So on 3, we'll end it with y'all come back now you hear, and y'all go check out LaunchDarkly. So 1, 2, 3. Y'all come back
now. You hear?
I love it.
Nice.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.